In the pulsing, humid heart of Lagos, a city that breathes ambition, lived a young man named Korede. His hands, though calloused from years of working with wood, possessed a rare artistry. He could take a discarded log and coax from it a masterpiece, a chair with the elegance of a dancer, a table that held the quiet dignity of a king. But his talent was a seed on barren ground. He was trapped by the grinding cycle of poverty, his days a monotonous echo of struggle and unfulfilled dreams. He and his family lived in a single, cramped room in a crowded compound, where the smell of burning kerosene and the murmur of 100 lives were a constant presence. It was amidst this suffocating reality that he met her. Her name was Ifeoma. She was not a vision of splendor but a picture of quiet grace. Her simple cotton wrapper, faded with wear, draped her frame with an understated elegance. She wore no jewelry, and her hair, braided in a simple style, was unadorned. Korede, waiting for a bus that seemed to have forgotten its route, was instantly captivated by her. She was a haven of stillness in the chaotic market. When she discovered she had no money for her fare, she did not panic or complain. Her face, a study in quiet despair, spoke volumes. Korede, with only the last 200 naira to his name, offered it to her. It was a simple act of charity, given without a second thought. He saw her face light up, not with relief, but with a sudden, beautiful shock. In that moment, he saw not her need, but her spirit. What Korede did not know was that Ifeoma was an elaborate disguise. Her real name was Anuli, and she was the sole heiress to the Oladele Group, a global business empire whose power was felt in every corner of the world. Her father, Chief Oladele, was a titan of industry, a man whose word could sway economies. His private jets were a common sight at international airports, and his properties, glittering towers of steel and glass, were landmarks in every major city. Anuli's life had been a meticulously planned dance of privilege and obligation. Her first love, a whirlwind romance with a fellow heir, had ended in a brutal betrayal. He had used their engagement as a stepping stone to a lucrative business deal with her family before abandoning her for another woman, a transaction disguised as love. The experience had left a deep, jagged scar on her heart. It had taught her that love, in her world, was just another currency. Heartbroken and disillusioned, she had made a solemn vow: she would find a love that was not bought, a man who saw her for who she was, not for the zeros in her bank account. She created the persona of Ifeoma and rented a small, humble room in a quiet part of Lagos, an escape from the relentless pressure of her gilded cage. Their love story was as simple and pure as her disguise. Korede saw the artist in her, and she saw the king in him. They spoke of the dreams, of a future carved from their own hands. Their marriage was a testament to their love, a small ceremony with a few friends and Korede's family. His family, though they tolerated Ifeoma, saw her as an anchor holding their ambitious son back. They had expected him to marry a woman who could catapult him into a better life, not a humble seamstress from a crowded compound. The early years were a beautiful struggle. They worked side by side, Ifeoma at her sewing machine, Korede at his workbench. Their small home, though sparse, was filled with the richness of their love and shared laughter. But Anuli knew this could not be their life forever. She had seen the quiet desperation in Korede's eyes. He had the talent, but he lacked the opportunity. She made a decision. With the help of her father's loyal business associates, she began to set the wheels in motion. An unassuming man named Mr. Peters, a senior executive in her father's company, arrived at Korede's small workshop one afternoon. He was looking for bespoke furniture for a new hotel project. The contract was small, but it was the key that unlocked the gate. Korede, overwhelmed with excitement, poured his soul into the project. His work was flawless, and it exceeded every expectation. The small contract became a larger one, and that one became a steady stream of orders from a massive, multinational corporation that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. The corporation, of course, was a newly formed subsidiary of the Oladele Group, and its sole purpose was to act as a silent patron to Korede. Within a year, his small workshop had blossomed into a sprawling factory. His worn-out tools were replaced with the most advanced machinery. The one-room apartment was replaced by a mansion that stood as a testament to his success. But with wealth came a change in Korede. The humble artist began to fade, replaced by a man of polished suits and expensive cars. He began to believe his own myth, that his success was purely his own genius, a triumph of talent and hard work. He had no idea that every opportunity, every contract, every dollar, was a gift from the woman he called his wife. Ifeoma watched him from the sidelines, her heart breaking. The laughter in his eyes was replaced by a cold, transactional calculation. He treated her with a perfunctory courtesy, a wife he had outgrown. His family, once subtly dismissive, now treated her with open contempt. They spoke of the disappointment that he had married a woman who could not socialize with the elites, a woman who knew nothing of their new world. Anuli, the powerful heiress, listened to their insults with a quiet, dignified sadness, her carefully constructed disguise now a prison of her own making. The love she had found had soured, corrupted by the very wealth it had brought. The date of their 7th anniversary approached, a date Anuli had marked in her heart as the day of her grand reveal. She had planned the most extravagant celebration, an opulent affair that was to be the stage for her truth. The invitations, sent from her family's proxy companies, were a quiet nod to her identity, but Korede, blinded by his arrogance, never noticed. On the morning of their anniversary, the air in the mansion was heavy with a cold silence. Korede did not wish her a happy anniversary. He simply told her to be ready for the party and that he would be bringing someone. He left, his phone buzzing with messages. Anuli's heart, a fragile vessel of hope, began to shatter. The beautiful gown he had bought for her felt like a costume for a play she no longer wanted to be in. The only source of warmth in the vast, empty mansion was their daughter, little Chiamaka. Anuli clung to her, the final piece of the life she had once so desperately loved. They arrived at the hotel ballroom, a cathedral of marble and crystal. But as they walked in, Anuli's world collapsed. Korede was not waiting for her. He was standing with a dazzling woman in a sequined dress, her arm linked with his. She was Amaka, the daughter of a powerful senator, a woman with a reputation for being as ruthless as she was beautiful. Korede walked towards Anuli, his face a mask of cold finality. "Ifeoma," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "This is Amaka, my new fiancée." Anuli's breath caught in her throat. She looked at him, at the stranger in his eyes, and a wave of nausea washed over her. He had not just betrayed her, he had shattered the very idea of love she had come to believe in. His family, gathered nearby, watched with a cruel smirk on their faces. "The charade has gone on long enough," he continued, pulling a folder from his jacket. The papers were neatly arranged, a cold, clinical document of their failed marriage. "We're getting a divorce. Amaka's father can give me access to the political circles that your connections never could. You'll get a handsome settlement, of course. It's more than you deserve, but I want to be a man of class." The words were a physical blow. The grand reveal she had planned, the moment of triumphant truth, was a mockery. She had been betrayed, not by a man, but by an empty vessel. She saw no love in his eyes, no remorse, only a ruthless, calculating greed. She looked at Chiamaka, whose innocent eyes were wide with confusion. She would not let this man see her crumble. She would not give him the satisfaction. With a final, heartbreaking sigh, she took the pen. She did not correct him, she did not fight. She simply signed the papers. But her signature was not Ifeoma. It was her real name, Anuli Oladele. She dropped the pen, picked up her daughter, and with a silent dignity that infuriated Korede, she walked out of the ballroom and into the dark night. She left behind not just her marriage, but the life she had so carefully constructed. The life of Ifeoma was over. The next 7 months were a blur of grief and healing. She returned to her family's home, a sprawling estate that felt less like a house and more like a private kingdom. Her father and her team welcomed her with a love that was a balm to her broken heart. She was no longer Ifeoma, the simple seamstress. She was Anuli, the princess, the heiress, the daughter who had returned home. For the first few weeks, she was a ghost in her own home, lost in the labyrinth of her pain. She spent her days with Chiamaka, a quiet period of rediscovering herself. But grief, for a woman like Anuli, was a fuel, not a prison. As the shock faded, a cold, hard resolve took its place. She was no longer a victim. She was a queen who had been wronged. Her father, a man who understood vengeance as well as he understood business, saw the fire return to her eyes. He gave her the one thing she needed, power. He named her the new CEO of the Oladele Group, a position that put the entire global empire at her command. The business world watched with bated breath. Who was this young, unknown woman who had suddenly risen to such a position of power? Anuli, with a quiet ferocity, began her reign. She was brilliant, ruthless, and intuitive. She moved with a purpose, a quiet storm of a woman whose every decision was a calculated blow. While she built her empire, she was also meticulously dismantling another. She had her team monitor Korede's every move, his business deals, his finances. She knew his every weakness. Korede, meanwhile, was soaring on the wings of his newfound freedom. He married Amaka, the senator's daughter, in a lavish ceremony that was the talk of the town. His company, once a well-oiled machine, began to sputter. The contracts from the anonymous parent company, the very lifeblood of his business, began to inexplicably fall through. His supply chain, once seamless, was now plagued with delays and errors. His new father-in-law, the senator, was of little help. The senator was a powerful man, but he was a small player in the global game that Anuli was playing. Korede's company's stock, once at an all-time high, began a slow, mysterious, and irreversible decline. He dismissed it as a temporary setback, a test of his resolve. He had no idea he was a pawn in a game of chess played by a queen he thought was a peasant. His new wife, Amaka, was as demanding as she was beautiful. She was materialistic and entitled, constantly demanding luxury that his shrinking empire could no longer afford. His family, so proud of him for marrying up, began to complain about his money problems. The new life he had craved was turning into a prison of debt and pretense. He was a fraud, living a lie, and the truth was slowly catching up to him. He was a king with no kingdom. 7 months to the day after the divorce, an invitation arrived at Korede's mansion. It was a golden ticket to the most anticipated social event of the year, a private celebration at the Oladele estate, hosted by the elusive Chief Oladele himself. The invitation, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Korede, was a final, elegant twist of the knife. Korede, now desperate, saw it as a lifeline. He assumed it was a chance to network with powerful people who could save his failing business. Amaka saw it as her chance to solidify her social status. They arrived at the Oladele estate in their last remaining luxury car. The sight that greeted them was something out of a fairy tale. The mahogany gates swung open to reveal a world of impossible wealth. The driveway was a constellation of Rolls-Royces and Bentleys. The air thrummed with the music of a live orchestra, and every corner of the vast garden was a masterpiece of lighting and design. They walked in, their heads held high, believing they were finally among their peers. They mingled with captains of industry, global financiers, and influential politicians, their arrogance blinding them to the cold, curious stares. They were a lie in a room full of truth. Then, the orchestra fell silent. A voice, rich and resonant, filled the air. It was Chief Oladele, standing on a grand stage at the center of the garden. "My dear friends," he began, his voice a low rumble. "I thank you for coming. Tonight is a very special occasion. 7 months ago, my family and I welcomed back our heart, our soul, and our future. Tonight, I present to you the new leader of the Oladele group, the woman who will carry our legacy forward. Please, welcome my daughter, the heiress to my empire, Anuli Oladele." A thunderous applause erupted. Korede and his family, frozen in place, watched as a woman of breathtaking poise and power walked onto the stage. She was not the simple seamstress he had abandoned. She was a queen in a custom-made gown of emerald silk, her face serene, her eyes shining with an iron-clad resolve. Her hair was a crown of intricate braids, and her presence was a force of nature. It was Ifeoma. Korede's world disintegrated in a single, gut-wrenching moment. He stared at her, his mind struggling to reconcile the simple woman he had known with the powerful figure on stage. His mother shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated disbelief. Amaka's face went white with horror. Anuli walked to the podium and took the microphone from her father. Her gaze swept over the crowd, and finally, it landed on Korede, standing motionless and broken. Her eyes held no rage, only a profound, devastating sadness. "I see some familiar faces here tonight," she said, her voice calm and clear. "You all know me as the new CEO of the Oladele Group. But 7 months ago, I was known as Ifeoma, a simple woman who was just divorced by the man she loved. That man, now standing with his new wife, is a true study in human ambition. Korede, I want to thank you." Her words were like a physical blow. The crowd, 1,000 eyes of the most powerful people in the world, turned to stare at him. Korede felt a cold, mortifying humiliation crawl up his spine. "You taught me a lesson," she continued, her voice unwavering. "You taught me that love, without integrity, is just a tool. The fame, the wealth, the luxury you so desperately craved, it was all a gift. A gift from me. The contracts, the partnerships, the entire foundation of your business, it all came from my father's companies. I gave it to you, hoping to build a future with a man of true character. But you chose to sell your character for a lie. You chose to abandon the woman who built your empire from the shadows for one who would only live in its reflection." She paused, and the silence in the room was a deafening roar. Korede's legs felt like they would give out. His mother, her face red with shame, pulled at his arm. "Today, I have signed the final papers," Anuli announced, and her voice carried the weight of 1,000 hammers. "I have officially acquired every asset of Korede's company. It no longer exists. The empire you so proudly built has now been absorbed into my own. The wealth you thought was yours was just on loan. And the loan has just been called in. As of tonight, Korede, you are nothing. You are the man you were 7 years ago, but with the added weight of your disgrace." Amaka, her eyes wide with shock and fury, pulled her arm from his. "You did this. You used me." She spat at him. "You are not a rich man, you are a parasite." She turned and stormed out of the ballroom, leaving him standing there in a public spectacle of his own making. Korede stood utterly alone, a man stripped of his pride, his family's respect, his wealth, and his future. The crowd began to murmur, and he could feel the pity and contempt in their stares. He had thrown away a queen for a temporary crown. He had traded a woman's love for a lie, and now, that lie had unmade him. He looked at Anuli on the stage, the woman who had given him the world, and he saw a quiet sadness in her eyes. It was not a look of triumph, but of loss. He had not just lost his wealth. He had lost the only person who had ever truly loved him for who he was. He was left with nothing but the crushing, deafening silence of his own failure.